Welcome back. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press. Today we're going to be reviewing a Western novel by Elmore Leonard. Yeah, many of you have probably heard of Elmore Leonard, but didn't realize he wrote Westerns. Yes, he does. He's mostly known for his Tarantino-esque mystery novels. You know, if you ever saw the Tarantino movie Jackie Brown, it was based off of an Elmore Leonard novel. In fact, Elmore Leonard is Tarantino's favorite writer, and he pulls a lot of his inspiration from Elmore Leonard. And it's probably why a lot of the Tarantino movies are either these hard-boiled pulp fiction type crime thrillers or like The Hateful Eight or Django Unchained westerns, you know? Because Elmore Leonard, our main man here, cut his teeth writing westerns back in the 1950s and 60s and 70s alongside Louis L'Amour. He was one of the nation's more well-known western writers at the time with Louis L'Amour, before he turned to his hard-boiled mysteries and became even more famous for that. So this is actually, The Bounty Hunters is actually the very first novel Elmore Leonard ever wrote and got published before he went on to write all this other. I've got every Elmore Leonard novel here. Even down to the Raylan. You know, if you've watched Justified, if you're a fan of Justified and Timothy Oliphant, and you've seen Justified, Justified is based on Raylan is based off of Raylan, the novel, the series of novels about Raylan Givens that Elmore Leonard wrote. The guy's an accomplished writer. An accomplished writer. This was his first book ever. I think it suffers a little bit from first book. I mean, you can tell when you read this Western that he hasn't quite found his voice yet. The voice that he was famous for, it ain't that present in this book. One of the things about Elmore Leonard novels, especially the Westerns, well, all of his stuff, that you're going to realize early on is his stuff is, if you're a fan of Louis L'Amour or Zane Grey, those are very, very PG rated books. Elmore Leonard's novels, even this very first one, dripping with R rating. I mean, there's curse words, there's incredible violence. I mean, it's just R rated stuff. So that's sort of the distinction we need to draw between Louis L'Amour and his other contemporary Western writers. Elmore Leonard was putting some bite and sting into his storytelling, even from the get-go, even back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, when it wasn't the most popular thing to do. But right from the get-go in this one, we find out that this is a hard R-rated book. What's it about? It's about bounty hunters. That's why we got the Boba Fett up there. That's why I was wearing my Boba Fett helmet in the thumbnail. Bounty hunter. You know, I probably should have worn my Boba Fett shirt. It would have made more sense. Should I stop the video, go get the shirt, put it... Nah, fuck it. We'll just pretend that these guys were bounty hunters. In fact, in their video, Too Young to Fall in Love, the Motley Crue guys were bounty hunters, searching for a lost Asian girl. We're getting sidetracked. Okay, these bounty hunters, Dave Flynn and Kid Bowers. I forget. I should write this shit down. Kid Bauer and Dave Flynn, they are our main bounty hunters. They are war veterans. They're still young guys, though. Veterans of the Civil War. They've seen a lot of stuff in their lives. They've seen a lot of hardship and things like that. There's an Apache that has escaped, a renegade Apache named Soldano Viejo, who's escaped and fled down to Mexico, and the Arizona officials hire Dave Flynn and Kid Bauer to go bounty hunt this Apache renegade. Go find him. And on their journey to find him, they run into, because they're bounty hunters themselves, but then they run into even worse, more less scrupulous bounty hunters that aren't just out looking for Soldano, but they're out there just scalping every Indian that they can find, which is bad, and so then they got to put a stop to that. Or do they join? Do they put a stop? Do they find it horrific? What happens in the story? That's why I don't want to give away too much of the plot. That's all I'm going to talk about. It's just bounty hunters out to get their bounty. They run across other bounty hunters who are worse than they are. What happens then? Who gets the bounty? Is the guy that they're searching for really as bad as they think? Or should they, that's the plot. Now, it's written, it just doesn't have the punch that later Elmore Leonard books have. The dialogue is a little melodramatic, and a lot of the scenes are described, and a lot of the characters are described, and in later Elmore books, Elmore strips down all the description. He just doesn't describe characters or scenes much. It's all about the crisp, snappy dialogue, kind of like those Tarantino movies. It's all about the crisp, snappy, witty, meaningful dialogue, which is throughout most of the 80% of the rest of his books. This one is a starter book, and it doesn't have the snappy, witty dialogue. It's got a lot of descriptive scenes in it, and you can tell that it's just not Elmore Leonard voice. It's just not his regular voice. But it is his first book. We got to give him that. It's a good enough book to get published. It's a good enough book that I enjoyed reading through it. And even Elmore Leonard's, average efforts are still better than most people's best efforts. So I still give this about a 6.5 to 7 out of 10. It's a good little first novel for someone who went on to have a stellar career.